This presentation is our leadership analysis of the United States, Mexico, and Singapore during the COVID-19 pandemic. You can go to the next slide. Sorry. First, we'll be talking about the leadership in the United States during COVID-19. The Lowy Institute created a table, which you can see in the right corner, that provides a ranked comparison of the performance of countries in managing the COVID-19 vaccine. In total, there were 116 countries that were evaluated. The rank and average of our other countries will also be stated later. The United States ranked 96 on that list, and their average was 18.8. When COVID-19 first broke out, Donald Trump was president and was making decisions for the United States regarding the pandemic. On January 20th, 2021, Joe Biden took office as the president and continued the duties of making decisions for the United States. The United States has been among those nations most severely affected by the first and subsequent phases of the pandemic of COVID-19. With only 4% of the worldwide population, the United States has seen about 22% of COVID-19 deaths. The restrictions that the United States has for COVID-19 is to wear a mask, wash your hands frequently, and social distance from others. And then next slide. So here's a timeline of United States' response to the COVID-19 in the beginning months. So on January 21st, the CDC confirmed the first United States coronavirus case. It was a Washington resident that recently returned from Wuhan. On February 3rd, the Trump administration declared a public health emergency due to the coronavirus outbreak. And on March 13th, President Donald Trump declares the coronavirus a national emergency, which unlocked billions of dollars in federal funding to help fight the disease's spread. And then also on March 13th, the Trump administration issued a travel ban on non-Americans who visited select European countries within 14 days of coming to the United States. And then on March 26th, the Senate passed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, which is the CARES Act. And it provided $2 trillion in aid to hospitals, small businesses, and state and local governments. The next day, the House of Representatives approved the CARES Act, and it was the largest economic recovery package in history. And then some other dates: on May 28th, the United States death toll passed its 100,000 mark. And on June 10th, the United States COVID-19 cases reached 2 million. On August 11th, the Trump administration reached a deal with Moderna, and they agreed to pay $1.5 billion for Moderna's 1 million doses of the vaccines. But they were still going through their trial phases. And then on September 16th, the Trump administration released a vaccine distribution plan, which was to make it free for all Americans. And once it was authorized, they planned to give $6.6 million or 6 million kits of supplies needed to administrate the vaccines. And this is just the beginning of the COVID-19 timeline in the United States.
Okay, so I'm Haley, and I'm going to be talking about the vaccine in the US. So vaccines work by training and preparing the body's natural defenses, the immune system, to recognize and fight off the virus and bacteria. So if the body is exposed to the disease, it will be ready to destroy them quickly, which prevents the illness. And when a person gets vaccinated against a disease, their risk of infection is also reduced. So they're less likely to transmit the virus or bacteria to others. So as more people in a community get vaccinated, fewer people remain vulnerable, and there's a less possibility for an infected person to pass it on to another one. So on the slide, it just shows that 271 million doses have been given out to people, and 122 million people have been fully vaccinated in the US, which brings it out to 37.1% of people that are fully vaccinated in the US. And in the graph, it shows that it gradually went up every month, which is good. And then on the right, it just shows like the age groups of how many people have gotten the first dose and then how many people are vaccinated. Next slide. So for this slide, it just shows that it just shows the states and how many new cases there are. So for Colorado, it's dark blue, which means that they have the most new cases. And for us in California, it looks like we're doing better because we are like in a lighter blue and that we have less new cases than some of the other states.
So I'm Alejandro, and I'm going to talk about the situation in Mexico. Next, please. So leadership in Mexico, the responsibles of making decisions and to lead the situation about the pandemic situation was the president of Mexico, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and the subsecretary of health, Minister Hugo López Gatell. The rank of Mexico in the COVID performance index is 109, and the average is 6.3. The first case of COVID-19 in the country appeared on February 27th, and for this moment, the first statement that the president gave to the population was that fortunately our country is one of the most prepared countries and with less risk due to the pandemic of this virus. So then we are calm, of course, attentive but calm. Nowadays, we know that this first statement was completely wrong, and the cases increases more and more. That's why the first restrictions we implement, or the government implement in Mexico, was the use of the face masks mandatory, wash hands frequently, and the social distancing distance. Actually, this character down there is called Susana Distancia. It's a character that the government create um, to make people conscious about social distance and to make the social distance common restriction. Next, please. And the hard part of this pandemic in Mexico is the great number of deaths we have is around 220,000 of deaths. And there's another part that we cannot see in this graph, but it's about the millions of jobs that were lost. It's around 2.5 millions jobs were lost. And um this was a crisis, for a health crisis, but it's also an economic crisis that increased more and more and that have um, mm, yeah, that continues increasing and affecting everyone in the country.
Hey, I am Abril from the University of Guanajuato, and I am going to talk about the vaccine in Mexico. So as you can see, the total doses given is 21.3 million doses. The people fully vaccinated is 9.49 million people. So this give us the 7.4% of the people in Mexico vaccinated. So as you can see, the vaccination in Mexico has been pretty slow, and there is even people from Mexico who is going to the United States to get the vaccine. Can you please change it? Thank you. And now the COVID in Mexico today, we don't have as much cases as we used to have. For example, in the last December, we have over 120 cases, and now per day we just have like 20. And that's it.
Okay, great. How's it going, guys? My name is Jacob, and I'll be talking about the COVID 19 situation in Singapore. So, first off, I want to give you guys a brief background on the leadership in Singapore during the pandemic. The president of Singapore during the start of the COVID 19 pandemic was Halima Yacob. She is the first female president of Singapore. And Singapore has a unique style of government, and it's primarily controlled by one singular political party, which is called the PAP, or the People's Action Party. And the first case of COVID-19 in Singapore was reported on January 23rd of last year. And throughout the duration of the pandemic, the PAP implemented several different control measures to help combat the spread of the virus. Strict travel bans were among the first of these control measures, followed by mandatory mask mandates and contact tracing. Social distancing protocols were also set in place, which canceled all big events, and the PAP would also provide financial relief for businesses and workers. And in the COVID Performance Index, Singapore is ranked 14 and averages is 73.3. Next slide. In terms of the cumulative data associated with or with confirmed COVID cases in Singapore, they're actually doing pretty well. From January 3rd of 2020 till May 16th of 2021, there have been 61,000 confirmed COVID cases and only 31 COVID-related deaths. Singapore has a population of over 5.7 million people, and it's also important to note that the spread of COVID-19 in Singapore has been amongst the slowest in the world. Next slide. The current status of COVID-19 in Singapore has seen a downward trend in new cases. As you can see from the graph, there has been a steady downward trend regarding new COVID cases. Currently, there are 393 confirmed cases in Singapore today. And most recently, however, there has been a slight flare of new cases. And as of May 16th, a strict lockdown has been implemented and is expected to remain in effect till at least mid-June. This response to the flare-up of new cases has produced some of the strictest rules that the city-state has seen since the start of the pandemic. Outdoor gatherings are restricted to just 2 people, and indoor gatherings have been banned, which means most businesses will need to close for the time being and figure out a different way to continue operations. And that's it. Next slide.
Hey guys, my name's Tito Hernandez, and I'll be covering the leadership differences between the US, Mexico, and Singapore. So as you can see here, this is a chart that indicates the performance the United States, Singapore, and Mexico have between each other in terms of COVID performances. In the first several weeks, and I'm sure it was the same around the world, the performance for Mexico, US, and Singapore was fairly low. But throughout the weeks after the first 100 cases, you can see that each country improved significantly, especially Singapore. You can see that after the 28th week, their performance has been very excellent, as opposed to the US and Mexico that have similar performances that are in the low percentages. Next slide, please. And here we share a chart that indicates the population, the share of the population that's been fully vaccinated, not only with the first dose, but the second one as well. And over the last several months of this year, the US has had well over 35% of the population fully vaccinated. Singapore is around the 20th percent, and Mexico down low at just above 2%.
Hi guys, I'm Taylor, and I'll be talking to you about the cultural differences between the United States, Mexico, and Singapore. So the leadership differences can be accounted for the differences in the types of culture these countries have, Mexico and Singapore being collectivist cultures, and the United States has a strong individualistic culture. We can see these differences in leadership styles, but we can also see huge differences in follower styles because of the cultural differences. So people like Mexico and Singapore, they were following the rules a little bit better than people in the United States because of such strong individualistic ideals. The people of Singapore listened and followed precisely to the directions of their country's leadership, which is why they saw success much sooner than the US and Mexico. Singapore's leadership was consistent and directional, and so were the members of Singapore. Mexico, which is also a collectivist country, saw much later and less aggressive responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. Their leader also failed on creating a solid example for his followers to portray. He was seen many times wearing no mask and not social distancing properly. And the United States, being individualistic, saw barriers when trying to implement social distancing and mandates. No one really wanted to listen. The US also faced leadership problems like bad examples and late responses. Also, a lot of people of power not wearing masks and not social distancing properly. And here are some cultural differences that could affect decision making in the leadership of the pandemic. So for the United States, it was difficult to make people listen because of individualism again, and we had a late response time. Mexico also had a little bit of a late response time and lack of respect of government decisions. They also had a lack of sense of urgency. They thought they would be much better off than they were. In Singapore, they had strict order and rules following, highly respectful population, and citizens of Singapore, they really cared and they wanted to stop the spread of coronavirus. So they wanted to protect themselves a lot. And thank you for listening.